What would you do if this happened to you?
Have you ever felt like you weren't enough? I don't know who needs to hear this today, but let this be your sign. Welcome to another episode of Harder to Breathe. I'm your host, Ryan Dusick. I was the founding drummer of Maroon 5, but I'm now a licensed therapist, author, and mental health advocate. With us on this show, our guest is Kyle Nicolaides. He was the frontman for the band Beware of Darkness, and he now is an author and healer. And we're going to get into a conversation with him about depression, about healing, and about
plant
medicine. With me, as always, is my co-host, Duck Maylard. How you doing?
On plant medicine, I'm good. Right now I'm dealing with plaster dust medicine. I'm breathing so much plaster dust at my house. We're having some work done because, in LA, we're always renovating and making, But I'm breathing a lot of construction materials. It's terrible. So I'm happy to get out of the house and come over here and see you.
Yeah, well, I have construction going on here at the house too.
Like I said, everybody in LA, we always just have our houses worked on.
I mean, it's, these are Cadillac problems.
Right, we've got disposable income. We got to do something with it, right? This podcast makes so much money.
So there's a lot going on in the world. We've been talking about a lot on this show that it just keeps coming. It just keeps coming.
I think that's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just, inundate us with news stories and we can't fixate on what happened last week.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, man, just today, I don't even want to get into it, but it's like all this stuff, the Supreme Court rulings came out.
Yeah.
And without getting into specifics, because this, I'm sure, will be out in a couple of weeks.
It'll be out of the news cycle.
Yeah, we won't even be talking about it anymore, but it's just another one of those things, drinking from the fire hose again, right?
Right.
So it's, how do we compartmentalize today and talk about something entirely unrelated to the downfall of Western civilization?
But it's funny because, like our episode last week, if it was last week, I don't know when it aired, but we got into the weeds. We waded into stuff that we weren't comfortable talking about. This week, it's okay if we don't want to. You know what I mean? It's like these are all acceptable ways to deal with those stressors. Some days you have to face it head on. Other days you can just put it in the closet and talk about construction.
Well, I suppose it's fitting that Kyle's book is Thank God for Depression.
I'm excited to read this because I want to know what makes it so wonderful.
Well, I think with what we're describing, it's like we have to try to find the upside or the silver lining to everything that life throws at us. Mm-hmm. And I liked his perspective. It's an interesting conversation in terms of like even the things that really are damaging can be a lesson, can be something that we grow from.
I think of it this way. You're a big workout guy. You work out.
Sure.
When we go to the gym and the next day our muscles are sore, that's our muscle fibers, little tears in our muscle fibers that regrow and get stronger. So the next time we can lift a little bit more weight. Mm-hmm. That's what those things in our life, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's, trauma, can some ways make us stronger, can help us build muscles to be more resilient the next time. So again, it's about perspective. We talk about that a lot in this interview where you can't always put a positive spin on horrible trauma, but you can say, I learned from this, I grew from this. I'm not glad that it happened, but I'm glad the way I rebounded from it. Yeah,
and it takes obviously having awareness and your perspective shifting from one of shame and relating to that trauma as something that is really damaging. You have to have reached a certain amount of healing before you can then shift that perspective to like, well, that sucked, but now I'm in a place that I wouldn't have been if I hadn't had that lesson.
It's something that you talk about a lot on this show is like dealing with stuff when you're not in a crisis mode, like dealing with stuff when you're in a calm, rational place where you can go like, okay, I can look back with this, with the proper perspective and say, here are the benefits, here are the negatives, rather than trying to deal with it when you're in the middle of a mental health crisis. You're not making rational decisions. You're not making the best decisions. You just want to feel better in the moment.
Yeah.
And that can lead to self-medicating. That can make to self-destructive behavior, stuff like that. So
yeah, that's when I talk about, being proactive versus reactive. It's like if you wait until the crisis to try to, come up with some coping styles that are healthy.
It's too late.
You're scrambling for how do I get out of this immediately, and you haven't developed the skills to do so. So when you work on yourself and you develop those skills, and then life throws you the things that it inevitably does, that's, hopefully a better scenario because you've actually been practicing those skills and you can apply them and deal with whatever it is a little bit.
Now, the way Kyle has dealt with it and is learning and teaching others is through this use of plant medicine, which is ayahuasca, things like that. Do you have any experience with that? Like even recreationally, have you ever tried anything like that?
I've always been terrified of psychedelics of any kind. I mean, I will say I smoked pot never had a good experience with it for whatever reason, just didn't agree with my chemistry or my temperament. I always felt kind of anxious, paranoid, very hungry, like the munchies as they call them. Yeah. However, nothing tasted good to me. I had terrible dry mouth. So it was like torture. Yeah. And then I'd be like tired, but it was just, I didn't enjoy it. But I think for me, I never understood the appeal. I understand everyone's different, but you know, the appeal of psychedelics are basically you're opting to have a psychotic break for some period of time that you're committing to. I was like, why would you do that to yourself? That doesn't sound appealing to me. I know that for somebody else that has a different perspective or a different, you know, if it's an escape or if it's a way of confronting something, we get into this in this conversation, it could be very exciting. I remember hearing in the Beatles anthology, the differences of opinions, because Paul was kind of like reluctant to drop acid. He was like, I heard it's this thing where once you do it, you can never go back. And that was scary to me. And to John, that was actually kind of an exciting idea. And so for me, I'm more like Paul. I was like a little bit more buttoned up and I'm just like, I don't like the idea of going down some road I don't know if I can never come back from.
That was always sort of the fear for me with any drugs, which is why I never drank, the feeling of loss of control, the feeling of not being able to put the genie back in the bottle, you know? I was on Paxil, I think I told you years ago, and I don't
party
think,
animal.
Party, yeah, right. I went crazy. I did take some Xanax.
Oh, really?
I'm going to say recreationally. That's not what I mean, but like as needed. Like I wasn't on a regimen of it, but it was like before I took a flight, I would sometimes take it. And in those moments, I was like, I get it. Like I understand that it just takes it down from 10 to 6.5. And I was like, oh, I can live at 6.5.
Oh yeah.
I can deal with this, you know? So I can understand giving up some control if the control that you have is unpleasant. You know, if when I say control, I mean the status quo. If you're living at 10 and finally you say, I can't handle this anymore and this medication gets me down to a 6.5, I get it.
Well, you're definitely not an addict. That story tells me, because an addict would say, oh, I went from a 10 to a 6.5.
If I take 2.
Maybe if I take another one, I get down to a 2.5. Yeah. Let's see how low I can go.
No, I never wanted to do that. I remember like falling asleep easily. And I was like, oh, I'd be on the floor if I took 2. Yeah. So I was always able to just be like, no, I'll take, and then 4 months would go by and I wouldn't take another one. And then I'd have the last time I took one, I remember this very specifically, was that when we were buying our home, and it was, if you've ever bought a home, you know there are 10,000 pages of paperwork that you have to sign and this. And as an actor, I didn't have a W-2s. I didn't have things to prove how much money I made. I just had to be like, well, my corporate, I get paid through loan outs. And it was the most stressful time of my life. And I remember I was at like a diner with friends and my wife was on the phone. She was like, are you okay? I was like, no, she drove to the diner and brought me a Xanax at the diner. And I was like, all right. So that was the last time I did it. That was 13 years ago. So yeah, I'm not an addict.
Well, it's a complicated thing. I mean, these are conversations that can be very touchy when you talk to people about drugs and medicines and different kinds of medicines. And, you know, we get into this in the conversation to a certain extent, so I don't want to ruin that before we get into that. But I mean, for me, like I don't see it as black and white. Like I have my opinions as somebody in recovery about the dangers of any medicine. And you always have to consider that. And you have to consider the person, you know?
Yeah.
Some drugs are appropriate for some people and not appropriate for other people. And so, I don't know, people get touchy because he's like, well, you need to be able to take your medicine. And it's like, well, that might be great advice for one person, but it might be terrible advice for somebody else. But I admit my bias, you know? I mean, I'm somebody in recovery and I'm maybe more wary of what can become a problem in terms of reliance on medication than somebody who never had that issue before. And I'm also a therapist who's worked with a lot of different people and had anecdotal stories of, you know, I had one client that I thought was schizophrenic and it turns out he was just taking mushrooms and having these episodes that
during our
sessions. And I was like, this guy is seeing things that are not in the room. And then it turns out he was experimenting with mushrooms, and that can be very confusing and make your job as a therapist harder. Yeah. And it clearly wasn't helping him. This was not what he needed because he was, you know, on that threshold of
tough to have a therapist with 3 heads. Who do I talk to?
Yeah. So, you know, I think I knew when Kyle reached out to me that we were going to end up talking about some of this stuff. And in one way it was like, well, maybe we're not going to see eye to eye about this, but on another level, it's like, this is great because I know we have commonalities, but we're probably going to disagree about certain things. And if some of the last few conversations we've had have taught me anything, it's that we want to try to have conversations where we can see commonalities, but also disagree in a really respectful way, and then learn something from each other in the process. I'm sure that, I know that coming away from this conversation,
I learned a ton.
Yeah, I learned a lot. I think he learned a lot. It was really an interesting, in-depth conversation about this stuff. So anyway, we should just get into it.
Let's
right?
get into it.
I feel like we're talking around it.
Before we get into it, as always, if you like what you're listening to and you enjoyed this episode, give us a follow on Instagram, on YouTube. You can email us at hardertobreathepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on all the audio platforms and get involved. Be a part of the conversation. Message us. We'll message you back. And as a special bonus, stick around at the end of this episode because our guest today he plays us a song. He's a musician and he has a great history. And he wanted to finish the interview today with a song, which is a new experience for us here on the show. And I think we pulled it off very well. So stick around. It's a nice treat.
Yeah, and he's an excellent musician. And it's a great song. And so stick around for that. So without any further ado, here's our conversation with Kyle Nicolaides right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast. Kyle Nicolaides, welcome to Harder to Breathe.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here.
Awesome to have you.
Yeah.
This is very cool. We've reached this place on our podcast now that is an enviable position where we have interesting people reaching out to us now, which is awesome. We have just to get an email from you and check out your story and realize that, there's a lot of similarities, I think, between our stories. And that doesn't happen very often for me because I feel like my story is pretty unique. And so I was just excited to meet you and kind of learn more about both your background and what you're doing now, because we're probably like-minded on a lot of things, but we probably have some differences too. So to get things kind of rolling, we're just curious to heard that, you were in a rock band that had a lot of success. And at a certain point you walked away from that and that you struggled for some time and have found mental health and recovery. That's a long journey that I know for me has a lot of ins and outs. It took a whole book for me to tell my story. So doing it in the 5-minute version is not always easy, but if you could kind of tell us like just the origin story of how you got to that place where you had to walk away from the band that you had created and to this level of success.
I was a late teenager and I was going to USC and my dream was to be a musician, famous rock star, wanted to be in huge rock band. So dropped out of school, gave myself 6 months. I said, Mom and Dad, give me 6 months to see if I can figure this rock band thing out. When I dropped out of school, it was the first time in my entire life that I had space because my whole life had been structured minute to minute, extracurricular sports, all these things. So dropped out and had one of the worst depressive episodes of my life and anxiety. I had no vocabulary for mental health. Didn't know what a panic attack was. I'm spinning out. And I remember thinking I wonder if I get famous, I'll feel better about myself. I wonder if I sell a certain amount of records. I wonder if my guitarists are famous enough and if I'm well known enough, then I'll feel better as a person. So the cosmic irony and maybe the perfect divine timing is that at the end of the 6 months, I had a manager, I had an agent, I had attorney, record label, everything was set up. Meet my band on Craigslist. We didn't have that story where we'd been childhood friends. We literally met on Craigslist. 6 months later, we're making our first record, which was really hard and challenging. Had a handful of pretty abusive male, older, I don't want to say role models, but just very abusive times with people I was working with, which was hard. And then 9 months later, we have a top 5 rock hit and we're on the road touring for 2 years. That quick. And it was crazy. So, I'm 22 and now I'm depressed with money.
A great combination.
Yeah. And I'm depressed and anxious with fame now. And then all these other people, who are can you write more songs like this? Can you do this? Why can't you be this? And it was so overwhelming and I didn't know what to do with it. And if I look back at my journal at the time, it's Texas, never been more sad. London, want to kill myself, So, and the people that I opened up to about my mental health were straight up just abusive and not supportive. So I got that message okay, it's not safe to be vulnerable. It's not safe to open up. And the super short story was I kind of limped my way through another record, dealt with a lot of band member changes. And then I caught a minute where I was 26 or 27 and we had a tour come up And I remember thinking like, I guess I'll do that. And I promised myself that if I ever got to the point with music where I'm just going through the motions, that I needed to stop. So like, again, like super nutshell, like basically mental health just went unchecked, and I kept having panic attacks, and then all the fun left of it. And then I was like mid to late 20s, and then the only thing I knew how to do was just like blow the whole band up. And the joke was like, you know, everybody was like, oh, you're self-sabotaging, like, oh, you almost got there, like blaming me. And I'm like, you guys, I was in a mental health crisis. And like, no one, like, I think the industry back in the day, I mean, it was only like 10, 15 years ago, but it's like, there was no vocabulary for that, and there was no support for that. And, you know, my entire identity was guy in a rock band. That was my entire dream. I spent like, you know, since I was 10 years old dreaming of that. I got it. It didn't feel anything what I thought it would feel like. It felt worse. And then when it broke up, I had a complete identity crisis. And I think I was talking to my friend about this yesterday, who's a triathlete. And it's like, I feel like the US culture or Western culture, they're so focused on like, get to this point, get famous. But no one talks about like, what if you get there and it doesn't serve you? Or what if you need to shift into something else? And that's why I feel so resonant with your story. And I was thinking about this because my whole tenure in a rock band and in the music industry, it created the necessary suffering and irritant to start my spiritual path, which, you know, I'm still rationally understanding what that means. And it's really interesting because it's like, what perspective are you looking from? If you're looking from like the manager who wanted me to get famous, he's like, well, it's really bad news that like your band broke up. But then if you're looking from like a soul perspective and like, why are we here on this earth? Are we here to awaken and wake up? It's like, if you look from that perspective, then my band breaking up was the best thing that ever happened to me. So
in a strange way, you achieved that goal. Like,
yeah,
that's what it took.
Yeah, it's wild. You know, it's like, and you know, when things happen to us, we don't know if it's good or bad because we don't know where it's leading us. So the band broke up, and then, you know, I spent 3 years just like, I was afraid to tell people I was a musician because I was so depressed. I was suicidal daily, and again, just had no awareness of it. And then I managed by like the grace of God to get into a plant medicine ceremony, an ayahuasca ceremony. And in 2 nights that cleared 10 years of depression. And it gave me like the kind I realized the entire tenure of the band, I was looking for a connection to spirituality. So that kickstarted a completely different path, which like no one really understood at the time. And then that led to me writing this book. And then it led to me playing in ayahuasca ceremonies for like 3 or 4 years, which was insane. So I've had like a wild ass pirate journey. That was probably longer than 5 minute nutshell.
No, yeah, no, that was great.
That's perfect. You nailed it.
You timed it?
Yeah, I timed it. I was going to cut you off if it went long.
Like,
so
that's enough. You're done.
So you named your book "Thank God for Depression," which jumps out at me for a number of reasons. But first and foremost, you managed to fit in 4 words: gratitude, spirituality, and mental health awareness. Was that the intent in choosing that title, or what does that title mean to you?
When I found healing from depression, up until that point, I thought depression was the worst thing to ever happen to me because it destroyed my career. It destroyed my self-worth. You know, I thought my music and creativity was over, and it literally forced me back into like my parents' house and just like a little shell. So I was like, it's the worst thing that ever happened to me. And then after that first night with ayahuasca and a medicine called wachuma, which is a cousin of mescaline, I was walking, and I talk about this in the book, but I was walking through a huge field in this house we were at, and I was thinking like, how the hell did I get here? Like, what led me to this, like, and I'm hesitant to call it like a spiritual awakening because it sounds so pretentious. I'm just like, but what led me to like being reconnected with divinity? Like what led me to this experience of bliss and divinity and union? And then I realized it was depression. So then it completely rocked my world because again, I thought of my depression as the worst thing to ever happen to me. And then I realized, well, it's actually the best thing to happen to me because again, it was the prerequisite suffering that led me to this union with God, this experience in plant medicine that like I wouldn't change for the world. Like it was the most important experience I ever had in my life. So I alchemized that into the book and into the title because I think so many other people are just like, yo, depression's the worst thing that ever happened to me. Anxiety is the worst thing that ever happened to me. And then I'm over here asking the question, I'm like, what if we can flip that script? Because again, what if you don't know where depression is leading you? And through this book, I'm like, what if I can create a tiny bit of space to just have you question like, well, what if it is a good thing? Or what if there's a message in it? Or what if there's some wisdom in it? And it changes the relationship from a terrorist to a teacher. Because I know in my own life, when I saw depression as a terrorist, I spent most of my time hating myself, hating the depression, at war with it. It's kind of like parts work, it's like if you have these parts of yourself and you're just hating them and fighting them, you can't really listen to what they actually need.
Yeah.
And I think depression's the same way, where it's like if you're able to get quiet enough and, again, cultivate enough space where you can say like, wait, is there something in my life that needs changing? Is there something I'm really unhappy with? Like, where's my sovereignty and my power here to see how to alchemize this into the next like best version of myself. So that was my whole intent with the book.
So let's talk a little bit about this experience with ayahuasca. This is something that, people have some strong opinions about, myself included, which I'm going to put to the side for the moment. But I just want to hear about the experience, because it really shifted things for you, which has obviously been a really positive thing on your journey and your understanding of the function of depression in your life. Did it give you clarity in terms of like where the depression and anxiety came from?
Yeah. And I can speak to both separately, because the anxiety one is insane. And I haven't really shared that story publicly. But the other revelation I had with the depression was after ayahuasca, I realized that I've been attacking a symptom. It wasn't actually the depression that was the problem. And that's what the ayahuasca helped me with. And I think my orientation with ayahuasca is that it's an organized body of consciousness, it's intelligence, and it's so beyond any rational mind. Like, it's beyond rationality, which makes it hard to describe. Because it's the unknown unknown.
Sorry,
folks. No,
folks.
it's okay. Yeah, and that's like the magic of it, So, we're dealing with this consciousness and this intelligence that it's so mega that it can pinpoint the root of your depression and anxiety. And if you're in a ceremony, there's 20 other people in the room, and it's so intelligent that it's doing the same thing with everyone else, whatever their whatever their intention is. So for me, it showed me that the root of my depression was this idea of avidya, which is spiritual ignorance. And it's I forgot who I was at my core. So I forgot that I was a piece of God having an experience as a human being, and every single other person on the planet is that. So I basically got cut off from the understanding at my core I'm divine, and at everyone else's core they're divine. So if I look back on my life, that was the thing I wanted the most. Like, I was an unhappy atheist. Like, I didn't want to be an atheist, but like my entire life I've been longing for just some connection and knowing that there's something bigger than me out there. And I think the experience I had with ayahuasca, it's a direct experience and a direct knowing of like, whoa, there is so much more than what my mind thinks there is. And when you get a feeling note of that, it never goes away. And I can speak to the anxiety if you want.
Sure.
This is a mind blower, and I'm still sussing this story out. I'm actually writing a book called Thank God for Anxiety. And it's a shamanic, energetic, psychedelic approach to like healing trauma. Plant medicine works in different ways to heal you. Like, it can work on physical, emotional, energetic, spiritual. And if we look at like, assuming that the core of, not assuming, but for me, the core of my anxiety was trauma. And again, the magic of these plants is that they can go into your subconscious. They can go into parts of you that you shut off or didn't even know were hurting. So I somehow started playing in plant medicine ceremonies, which made the entire tenure of my rock band look like kindergarten. And I had this like 11-month period where I was playing in ceremonies like almost every weekend, and it was a lot. And at the end of that period, I started drinking the ayahuasca or wachuma, and I started having this experience of my nervous system getting blown out. And it was terrifying because it felt like I had Alzheimer's, and it felt like not blacking out, but just like so much intensity to the point of like, I would get overwhelmed and just blitzed out. And again, it's the same thing. Like, you guys are concerned because I'm telling you that. And it's like, yeah, it's brutal. Probably 2 years before that, I was in a medicine ceremony, ayahuasca ceremony. And it was like it was a pretty casual night as like ayahuasca ceremonies go, it's like healing dead relatives and talking to spirits and stuff. And then at the end of the night, all the helpers go to sleep. And it's like the kind of curfew, like the cutoff time, like the bar closes, the psychedelic bar closes. So as soon as they go upstairs, I regress to being a premature infant, which I was. I was born 6 weeks early. I was in an incubator for 6 weeks. And I remember thinking like, whoa, I'm all alone in this incubator. And like, I could viscerally feel my mom's fear. I felt trapped. I felt dumb. And I like literally had this somatic experience of like, oof, I'm in an incubator again. And I was helpless. I couldn't get out. I felt stuck. And I remember I woke up the next day and I was like, that can't be real. Like my body holds the memory of that. What? Like this is bogus. And then, flash forward to the experience I told you about the kind of nervous system blitzing out. I had another experience of reliving my premature birth on these plant medicines. But this time it wasn't the understanding of like, oh, I was born a premature baby. That's cute. It was literally all the energy that was stuck in my body. And it was the most gnarly, harrowing thing I've ever experienced because I'm on the floor and I'm feeling like the fight and flight terror of like, I'm stuck in this box. I don't know if I'm going to live. Doctors are grabbing me. I don't know if they're going to hurt me or attack me. The lights are blinding. Everything's overwhelming. And I had a woman basically do a rebirthing ceremony with me. So it was really intense. And that was kind of the first step to healing my nervous system. And it took a year or two to like basically get stable enough again. But like, that was one of the magic things where I was like, I look back at my entire life and I'm like, like if you looked at me wrong, whole body felt like it was lit on fire. If someone said something wrong, like the sensitivity. And then I started working with a birth trauma specialist who basically helped me integrate all those experiences. And she was like, yeah, like all that adds up. She's like, you're in an incubator, your skin's not fully formed because you were born too early. Like there's no boundaries, and I'm like working on codependency right now and like boundaries. And it's like the skin wasn't formed. Like there was no separation between you and other people, again, like the lights are blinding. Doctors are grabbing you. You don't know if they're helping you or not. They're sticking things in your mouth. It's like, why do I feel violated and powerless? So it's like through the magic of that plant medicine, it was, again, a long unraveling of like years, but was able to unpack that, which is still, it sounds crazy and insane, but
I want to get specific about these ceremonies because I don't know much about them, but I want to real quick, allow me to sort of be not a counterpoint because I don't know. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a guy. And I'm also a guy who has never done any drugs. Mm-hmm. I've never had any addictions or anything like that. So there is a part of me as not a cynical guy, but just as a guy who goes, this is just people who just want to do drugs. And they just want to sit in a field and say, it's a spiritual experience, but you know what I mean? Again, I'm not saying that. I'm just
it's fine. Yeah.
Giving the counterpoint of like, how is this different than people going to Coachella or a rave and all taking ecstasy and be like, it was spiritual, man. You just want to do drugs. Like, what's the difference in your mind? And do you see that there are people who sort of piggyback on the spirituality of it and it's different for you?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's very important too.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of context and there's a lot of subtleties.
Yeah. And also there's a lot of opportunity for people to be like dismissive of it.
I was talking to someone about this yesterday too. And I'll get into that more, but I think intention is huge because these plant medicines are not fun. Like they're not party drugs.
Yeah.
And I heard it, I was with a shaman. I was with he was a healer, and his words were essentially like, these plant medicines go down rough and they're bitter and it's work, but then your life gets better after. And with drugs, it's like, it feels good, but your life gets worse after. Mm-hmm. And that's like a very simple explanation of it, but
that's interesting.
Yeah. And I, from what I've heard, I don't think, well, I don't want to say this out loud. I mean, there is a chance to get addicted to it, to an experience, but again, like, it's not like smoking weed where you can just zone out. Mm-hmm. It's like you drink ayahuasca or mushrooms and then you're having trauma come up or having like, it's basically doing work.
Yeah.
But again, like, I think you have to be very mindful because in all the containers that I've done, it's a ceremony. Mm-hmm. And basically what that means is that like people come together because they're suffering. They're not happy, they're depressed, they're anxious, they're addicted to something, they're traumatized, and they want their life to be different. And most times it's a last resort. They've tried other things. Mm-hmm. And you get together in a container. There's protection set.
What's a container?
A container is basically, it's a good question. A container is where you just set intentions and set protections and basically say like, this is a playground of light for us to do healing in.
Okay.
And I think when you think about festivals, it's like, again, the intention, people are more just like, I want to get fucked up and high and party and listen to this band, which maybe it is spiritual. But it's also like, that's where people freak out. And I think it's almost used as a prayer of just like, I want my life to get better. I want to heal. And then that's when you start to partner with the different bodies of consciousness and then invite it in. So there's a respect and a reverence and almost like a sanctity to the ceremonies.
I like the idea of intention being the delineation of like, I want to get fucked up, or no, I really want to fix what's deeply rooted inside and I can't get to it any other way. I've tried other paths.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, again, like there is also a lot of subtlety in this conversation and a lot of context. And I don't want to just give black and white because like I've seen people do ayahuasca every week and it just breaks their brain. Or I've seen people get addicted to hape, which is a tobacco snuff, you know, and even mushrooms. It's like, I just did a mushroom ceremony last week and it's like, you know, we did it. It was a men's circle. Everybody wanted to work on things. It was like the utmost integrity and it was a healing, you know, and it's like, you can easily do mushrooms and just be like, you know, again, like this just came up too. It's like, are you using it to avoid something or are you using it to confront something and go towards it?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like we can use beer to avoid things, alcohol to avoid things, you know? And I think it's funny because, you know, I went to my doctor. She's like, are you addicted to ayahuasca? I was like, it's the least fun thing to be addicted to, you know, because I don't want to say you can't, but it's like, there's a lot of nuance because it's like, you can be addicted to having a big spiritual experience and you can confuse having a spiritual experience with change. And that's where integration comes in, you know? So again, there's a lot of nuance here. And I think it takes I was talking to my friend about this yesterday. You need a lot of awareness to be able to have these experiences and then say, okay, how am I going to change my life? Because the ultimate thing with these plant medicine experiences is that they give us a new way of being to reach towards. And then our job is to say, okay, I've been shown this new way of being. How do I turn that into daily action? You know, and I just know like, you know, nobody drinks a beer and they're like, okay, I'm sanctifying this and I'm going to use this to be a better person.
Unless it's a really good beer.
Yeah.
They do drink the sacrament in church. You know, there's intention there. But I'm glad that you made that delineation between intention because this is a conversation I think that's really important. We talked about nuance recently and how important nuance is. We have a tendency in our culture, I think, to just like think good or bad, like two extremes. And if it's good, then we should just be running towards that full speed ahead without any concern or any sense of where the boundary is.
Yeah.
And, you know, you kind of put your finger on what my concerns are around that because I know the evidence is there. A lot of these plant medicines are showing great promise for treating depression, anxiety, trauma, and other things. I will admit my own bias because I'm a sober person for 9 years. You know, you hear a lot in AA, you know, some groups will say any kind of drug, you know, whether it's an antidepressant or anything, is not being sober. Right. I don't agree with that personally. But I do think it can be tricky where that line is and how you delineate. And I like the idea of intention. And the other concern I have, because I've warmed up to the idea that these things can be helpful for the right people, is that because we have this tendency, it's like, well, marijuana is not so bad. It can be used medicinally. Now we have people smoking so much that they're having psychotic breaks and it's available in every corner. And so it's like, how do we have conversations where we can educate the public that there is a such thing as too much of a good thing? I've met people even in my practice that are what you describe as somebody's like, they went in with the intention of doing ayahuasca because they wanted to heal their addictions and their depression and anxiety. And then they end up just dropping out of society and doing drugs like every weekend to live on this trip. And it's like, you know, if you're doing it every weekend and it becomes something that you're seeking as a way of escape, as opposed to, as you said, to confront something, then anything can become a problem in that regard. So how do we kind of navigate the pitfalls and the potential dangers of things in a socially conscious kind of way? Because you hear people talk about it with great fervor, like this is the answer. Yeah. And that can be taken the wrong way.
Yeah. And I tried not to do that in my book because I don't think plant medicine is for everyone. And you can get to those realizations with other things like meditation. And like for me, I think it's everything is just a tool. And I think that you have to be able to cultivate enough awareness of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it. Because I agree with you, you're right. And I've met a ton of people who are sober and doing plant medicine, and they have a stigma around it. And I totally get that. And I think I've been on multiple antidepressants throughout my life. And I remember hitting a threshold with them and then realizing like, oh, I need something different. Like I need to have an experience. And then I've also done that thing where I'm like, oh, I think I've done too much plant medicine. I need to take a step back. So I will be the first one to admit that like I haven't nailed it all the time, and I've made mistakes, and I don't know if I have the big answer for that, but I just think it's like, you know, I was just with a friend and his whole way is like, are you doing things in a good way? And I'm like, oh, that's like the most simple way to explain it, you know?
The journey is the thing.
Yeah.
And even if you make missteps along the way, if you're headed towards the right goal, it's a net positive.
I think it's also the kind of thing where both things can be true. You know, that's the other kind of conversation we need to be having societally. It's like these things could be good. They could be things that are helpful.
Yeah.
But there could also be dangers and things you have to be aware of.
Yep.
Something that's there can be too much of a good thing. And so let's investigate it. Let's study it. Let's find where that line is so that we know we're doing it in a responsible way and that we're helping people, as opposed to just recommending everyone should be doing, you know, should be microdosing mushrooms, or everyone should be going on journeys every weekend. Because then it's like, okay, well, where is the line?
Yeah, I'm sitting with that phase, too much of a good thing.
What does it bring up for you?
That's what I'm trying to like suss out. I think that, I mean, another kind of vantage point to look at it is everyone's conditioning is different and everyone's karma is different. And then everyone's soul journey is different, which is another kind of macro perspective. And I think you just need to have good people around you who can recommend like, hey, don't do that. Like there was someone, a participant at one of the ceremonies, and she's like, I need to do 8 ayahuasca ceremonies in a row. And I'm like, no, you don't. I'm like, that's the part of you that is trying to push through everything and figure it out. And she's like, oh. And I was like, what if you just need one? You know? So I think the tricky thing with these plant medicines too is that it takes a lot of awareness to decipher what the message is, because sometimes it's not clear. If that makes sense. Like, you know, it's not as clear as being like, hey, you need to do this. So, and I think that's where the trouble can get into, because sometimes you can have trouble understanding what the actual message is, and if it's a message from like a divine guidance, or if it's your brain mirroring itself and trying to protect itself, or trying to stay stuck in its obstruction. And it's funny too, because I think there's a part of me that it's like the way that my brain works, where I'm like, I know if I'm looking at weed, like I don't think weed is a medicine. And there's a lot of like hippies who would scream at me for that. But like, I think it's, you know, I've heard from people that it's psychoactive, that like, it's just not that healthy. And I think, again, going back to like, are you using something to mask or using something to go deeper into yourself? And that's like ultimately a question that only we can answer. And that's where it's helpful to have a therapist or friends or people with more experience. Like the first 3 years of my medicine journeys, I had basically a medicine mom who was basically like a mentor and a guide who had like 10 years of experience, you know? And when I was doing it too much, she's like, Kyle, like you need to integrate. It's like you went to a buffet and you stacked all the food up and you're not eating any of it. And I was like, oh, you know? So it's like, again, it's like, I think every person's different. There's a lot of context needed. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of subtlety. And ultimately it's a game of like watching your own mind, you know? Cause again, like I think when I hear about, and the whole, people get really weird with psychedelics. Like I'd never want to be that guy who's like, it's the answer, everybody should do it. Cause it's like, it's not. And when I first started doing it, I had people do that to me and it was terrifying, you know? And again, like, I just think that we have so many tools across the board, Western, Eastern, practical, mystical, shamanic, spiritual, that like my whole kind of path is just to say like, hey, here's the wisdom that I found and here's what's worked for me. Like go try. Yeah. Here's the doors, walk through them, see what works for you. Because I think anytime people do get dogmatic about it, it's like not black and white, you know?
About anything.
No.
And I think it's funny, the experience of having difficulty interpreting what those messages are isn't unique to plant medicine or psychedelics. It's life. I mean, I struggle with this in my career where I go, should I read the tea leaves when I can't get a job for a year? Is that this universe, cosmic, deity, whatever, spirituality telling me it's time to hang it up? Yeah. Or is that just my own defeatist attitude saying, you suck, you're terrible, you should quit? You know, so we struggle with that in all aspects of our life.
It's true.
And so I wish I had learned that earlier, that those speed bumps or those roadblocks may just be a diversion or pointing you in the direction you should be going, rather than saying, well, that's the end of this road. You know what I mean?
So true. And that like kind of reminds me of like, what is your orientation with all this. Because if your orientation is like, okay, there's these psychedelic and shamanic tools that are going to help my soul awaken or help me awaken to the true nature of reality, then whatever obstacle comes up, then you're going to use as fodder to alchemize. But if my intention is like, I don't want to feel, or I'm scared, because again, like I've seen hundreds of people do ayahuasca and there's only been like 2 or 3 that came in and they're like, this is a party drug. And they left because they're like, it's not.
Is that the job of someone, I don't want to use the wrong terminology, but as a guide, as someone who's there helping people along the way of like keeping it positive, keeping it productive rather than letting you regress or have a bad trip or, you know, I sound like a grandpa, but you know what I mean? Like,
No, you don't sound like a grandpa. I mean, that's also very important because, I can, if it's helpful, I can just sum up the like ceremony.
I'd really be interested in that because you've said it a bunch of times and I don't know what that is.
Because that's the other thing too. So, okay. 2 things I'm just going to say out of the way is that with plant medicine right now, especially ayahuasca, the best analogy I have right now is yoga. So yoga started in India, branched out. When it came to the West, people like Baron Baptiste or Core Power sort of, I don't want to say bastardized it, but they flipped it. So it's more about like, do as many poses as you can, get a great ass, get a 6-pack. And the idea of yoga is, again, how to yoke into union. Like, how do you, again, awaken, not suffer as much? How do you use these postures to suffer less? So there's like a Western idea that doesn't have lineage. And then there's the traditional yogic lineage of, you know, Vedic, I don't want to say gurus, but just smart people. And plant medicine's the same, where it's like, it started in the Amazon. There's people who've been doing it for generations upon generations. They're curanderas, they're maestros, they're healers. And they sing these things called icaros, which are songs that the plants gave them, and they're used for healing. So, and then again, it's not the good or bad, like it's not black and white, because it's the same thing. It's like you go to the jungle and there's people doing black magic. There's people doing black magic and like cursing you, and like the shaman are fighting each other, which is insane, you know? So then now, you know, fast forward to California, you have people who might not have that lineage, but they have good heart and good intentions, and they're doing the best they can. And they also have a Western mind to help people. So I just wanted to name that because it can get a little dicey and just figuring out like what the right thing to do is, you know? So I come from ceremonies that do 2 nights of ayahuasca and 2 days of cactus called Wachuma, which is San Pedro. And it goes Friday to Sunday. And these ceremonies, I just saw a comic at the Comedy Store, and he's like, yeah, my wife just did ayahuasca in the most traditional setting, a garage in Sherman Oaks. And it's like, it's terrible to joke about, but it's like, that was my experience, you know? It's like literally houses in Santa Monica, the most residential streets in Santa Monica, in Long Beach, in Santa Barbara, in Carmel, in Big Sur, like all these places, just houses. And the intention is just helping people heal. So you get in these spaces, there's mats everywhere. They move all the furniture out. There's, my friend calls them flippin' fucks. There's these, you know what that is?
Of course, I went to college.
I never heard of that. Yeah, so these little mats, there's a bucket because you purge, which is also a huge part of the ayahuasca, which we can talk about later. But
another reason why I would never do it.
Yeah, so we can talk.
What you need though.
That's true.
So that's the thing. We can talk about that because most people who have done ayahuasca over and over again, they say that's the best part. It's the absolute best part is getting
so do
energy
people
out.
with eating disorders.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could talk about purge now. We could talk about later. But like, so, you know, you do an intention circle. There's usually a practitioner, a facilitator who brews the ayahuasca themselves. They put their energy into it. You hope it's as clean as possible. And then they have a handful of guardians. And essentially, like, again, I know you're a therapist and I'm not a therapist, and I'm coming into the mental health space with a different perspective, and I'm still navigating that for myself, not feeling like a total fraud. So the guardians are there because basically trauma can come up on the ayahuasca, and it's a chance to have a corrective experience, or it's a chance to like move the energy out of that trauma. So if people need help, if they need anything, the guardians come in. You know, it's like, because again, like the plant medicine works in different ways. So, and I can even go through those if you want to hear about it, but it's like one of the ways is it can like rewrite memories, where you experience a memory that was traumatic and you either understand it from the abuser's perspective. Like I think the example, I don't know if it's in this book, but it might be in my next book, but like flashback to the person I worked with in the music industry. I was bottoming out. he called me into his office. I'm making my first record, and he's like, in my 50 years of being in the music industry, I've never seen anyone as depressed as you making their first record. He's like, what's happening? I was like, I think I'm depressed. Like, I don't know. I just want to die. And his response was like, if you're so depressed, just go kill yourself. And it shattered me. Like, I was 20, and I just remember like this feeling of just the room closing down on me. It felt like I was blacking out. And it was the first time I really opened up to anyone about my mental health. So, you know, I'd done like 2 or 3 plant medicine ceremonies. I'd been dreading him coming up because I was terrified. So then finally he came up, and I yelped for the shaman, and I told him the situation. I know this isn't directly the medicine telling me, but I think it was channeled through him, where he's basically like, hey, like, he couldn't hold his own pain and he had to inflict it on you. So again, talk about the space. It created a little bit of space to see like, oh, it's not even about me. It's about how unhappy he was. And then I got to think of like, what actually happened in his life that would lead him to be so mean and so, you know, essentially abusive. And then that was kind of the first spark in me being able to let him go.
That's one of my favorite things from the Four Agreements. Have you read that book? You know, that's ancient, I think, Toltec wisdom.
Yeah.
You know, nothing is personal.
Yeah.
Whatever pain you feel from that's inflicted on you by other people, it comes from their pain. Mm-hmm. And so when we internalize it as something that is an indicator of our failing or our worth, that's us taking somebody else's pain and making it our pain.
It's true.
When you go through life, it's like, I feel like this could save so many people so much heartache and so much difficulty in their lives, because even just like driving down the road on the highway, it's like somebody cuts you off. It's like, why do you get so angry? Is it really going to affect your day that much unless you let it affect your day? But it's because you feel like somebody disrespected you and diminished you in some way. And then you're angry at them, or you're whatever it is that comes out, and then it ruins your whole day.
Yep.
And it's like, that person has their own reasons for whatever they're doing on the highway that day. They may be late. They may be angry themselves. It's something else that has nothing to do with you.
Yep.
And now you've made it personal.
Yeah.
And if you can just lift that element of it, it's inconvenient, it's frustrating, but it goes away immediately after that, because there's no personal slight involved.
So true.
And so that's a powerful that's something that I talk about in regular therapy. So there's crossover there in terms of the spiritual element that you're describing and just sort of traditional therapy talk.
Yeah.
No, I'm curious to hear your response to that.
I think I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think that, again, one of the magic experiences that I've had a handful of times with this plant medicines, and we don't have to talk about ayahuasca the whole time, but is that when you have a somatic feeling tone of forgiveness, it makes all the difference. Because I know with my own life, and my meditation teacher has the perfect phrase for this, where it's the difference of reading a menu at a restaurant versus tasting the food. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you can rationally understand, and believe me, like, I've been the person that has just lived in my head, and I'm like, yeah, I understand that I'm traumatized, you know, but again, it lives in your body. You can mentally forgive somebody, but if that person comes around and your body still contracts and gets tight, there's still memory in there that needs to be moved. So, you know, I've had a handful of, it's wild because it's both somatic, energetic, and somehow mystical, where like someone has hurt me and traumatized me, and then I'm able to see exactly why they would do that. And if I told you out loud, it wouldn't make sense, but it's just like a knowing.
You can feel it.
Yeah. And then it kind of comes back to like, I'm going to bring it back to the purging, because, you know, trauma is energy that gets stuck in our body. And one of the magic things about the plant medicine is the purge. So, and I think this is the difference between people who have not sat with these medicines versus the people who sat with these medicines, is that the people that haven't sat, I think, don't fully understand what it is. Because, I mean, it makes sense. You're like, oh, I don't want to throw up. You know, I don't want to do this. Like, of course you don't. But when you're having visions, usually you're being confronted with something you're stuck with, whether it's like self-defeating thoughts or another person or just some really gnarly kind of thing. And then when the purge comes, it's literally the medicine, like getting all that energy out of your body. And it's the same sort of thing where like, there's probably no science to back this up, but like when people notice such a palpable difference between that energy in their body and then getting it out. And again, it could be trauma, it could be entities, it could be, you know, a couple other things. And I'm trying to think if there's like an example, but nothing's coming to mind really.
This is sort of side related. I remember the first time in acting school when we were doing like massage and like all these things that you just, this touchy-feely. And suddenly I started weeping.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Even now I think about it, and it's such a profound experience for me of like, why am I bawling?
Yeah.
Someone's just rubbing my back, but they're getting to something. And it was deeper than any like just friendly back rub. It was this thing where we stuck with a spot and we found something, and I was weeping. And by the end of it, I was like exhausted and wiped. But it was the first time I ever noticed that connection between the physical and the mental.
That's like the perfect segue, because you can look at depression and anxiety through emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of ancient lineages and teachings that say the flip side of depression is anger.
Mm-hmm.
So the question of like, are you healthily expressing your anger?
Yeah.
Do you have outlets? Because I think that's where people get a bad trip on the medicine, is because there's feelings they don't want to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember I had one night on the medicine where I was just suffering and stuck the entire time. And the medicine, I call her she, but she's like, hey, these are all the things that you have not been willing to feel the last 8 years. And it has to move out if you want to be, present and forward facing. And I know anxiety is the same. It's like every time I repress emotions, I start to feel anxious.
Yeah.
So it's like the simple question of like, is there anything I'm not saying? Is there anything that needs to be expressed that's not? And you don't need psychedelics to do that. I went to this shamanic sexual retreat, which was like bonkers and like
What's that?
Just bonkers, dude.
You got my attention.
I don't even know. The stories are so insane. I don't even know if they warrant like retelling, but if it comes up, I'll start telling them. But like one of the tools they taught us was emotional release, which was like pillow pounding and hand screaming and all these other things. And the same thing, like I was like, I don't have any rage. But then I remembered in the days of the rock band, I was so angry that I was scaring people who were like 6 foot tall. Like I would just go on stage and self-destruct and like smash guitars and then hate myself after. And then I remember shutting my rage off because I was like, it's not safe, because I just go so rageful and then feel suicidal. Cut that part of me off. And then I realized I was cutting half of myself off. So I started doing these emotional release techniques, and the anger scared me because I screamed for 2 hours and I felt like it was bottomless. But the same thing, like after screaming, there would be an emotion I didn't want to feel. There'd be sadness. There'd be some grief. And it's funny because often like anxiety or anger, they're just masks for what is actually below, So it's like, again, the plant medicines can help that. Emotional release can help that. Like aspecting can help that. Like there's a lot of things that can help move that. And
well, as a therapist, I see anger show up in two different ways. One is what you just described. It's a mask for something more vulnerable. It's a secondary emotion. It's a way of coping with something that feels too painful to deal with, that it manifests as anger because that feels stronger. It feels more powerful. And you can take it out on somebody else rather than on yourself, right? That's the people who have anger issues, anger management problems, that tends to be the thing, is they're avoiding something more painful and more vulnerable underneath.
yeah.
The other way in which anger manifests is like some things actually warrant anger, right?
Yeah.
There is such a thing as righteous anger.
Yep.
If you were abused in the way that you're describing, or just something like something was not done to protect you in a certain way, or somebody took advantage of you in a certain way that didn't respect you as a human being, and you have a right to be angry about that, but it didn't feel safe to express that. The person that did it, it wasn't safe for you to take it out on that person or to express it in that moment. So you buried it instead.
Yeah.
So then what happens is the anger doesn't come out. It becomes something that's repressed. And so what happens in the place of it? Well, my favorite phrase is depression is anger turned inward.
Yeah.
So instead of the person that you probably should have directed that anger at, you directed it at yourself. And then you internalize the shame that somehow this was my fault, that I deserve this in some way. And that's the kind of anger that you need to have let out. It's like when people talk about going into a rage room and doing what you're describing, like just breaking stuff and it's like, I don't know, should we be recommending that to people? Like just like embracing that kind of rage? For somebody who has anger management issues, absolutely not. They need to find better ways, more constructive ways of dealing with their pain.
Yep.
But somebody who's never let that out
Yeah.
and has a right to let it out, that has righteous anger that needs to come out, that can be a totally cathartic release.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's true. My teacher says like there's obstructed anger and then there's anger with a clarity to it. Kind of what you said of like, wait, I'm crystal clear. I can't take this anymore. So
Can I ask just logistically with some of these medicines or all of these medicines, are you, because you talk about the experience after the fact. You can look back and think back. Are you fully, I don't want to say conscious, but like, are you aware in those moments? Like, are you in another place? Is it like being drunk where you're like, I don't, when I was going through it, I didn't know, or are you completely aware of what's happening as you're going through it? You know what I mean? Or is it different for different medicines?
This is the wild part, is that it's completely different every time you do it.
Oh, really?
So I was writing about this in my next book where I'm like, imagine you're at a bar, but like every time you drink a beer, you're just like, oh, I'm reliving a past life. Or like, oh no, the person next to you is like reliving their deepest trauma from this life, you know? And that's the thing with ayahuasca. So, or even other plant medicines, and it's different.
Okay.
Like dosing is important.
I mean, you say Friday to Sunday. I mean, that's not 3 hours of a fun
That's a commitment.
trip. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And that's the thing. Again, there's like a lot of context. So everyone's different. Sometimes you're completely aware of what's happening. Like I just did a mushroom ceremony last week, and everyone took like 2 grams and I took almost 5. And it was interesting because I don't want to say I blacked out, but it was like my conscious completely got out of the way, and it was, somebody was working. I don't know who it was, but it was getting really deep-seated subconscious, unconscious parts of me, like the deepest shame, the deepest, lack of boundaries, like the fame, like me wanting to be famous, and it was moving all that stuff out. And, I was talking to my friends after, and I was like, yeah, I'm not really sure what happened, but, it's none of my business. Like, I know something happened, because I think I've done this enough where I'm like, I don't need to remember it fully. But then there's some journeys where, like when I was working the ayahuasca ceremonies or playing music in it, I would have a micro dose, and it would be, a 45-minute journey where I could open my eyes and be here and present. But if you close your eyes, you drop in, and sometimes you're communicating with ayahuasca. Sometimes you're seeing visions and colors, so it depends. And it's interesting because sometimes people, and again, it's going to sound bonkers. Like I know I might sound crazy or weird or shamanic, but it's like, I've had experiences of like the deepest, and I've seen people have these experiences where they black out and you're like, hey, is someone there? And it can be a little scary because, and that's what the guardians are there for. They're there to watch and make sure they're okay. And 9 times out of 10, those people wake up the next day and they're like, I am reborn. I'm a different person. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your
It does. Absolutely.
I think that what you've described in terms of having a guardian or somebody who is an objective person, that's a guide or whatever you want to call it, is a really important part of it. I think that the line for me is like, what's therapeutic and what's not therapeutic. And you're not always going to be the best judge of that because you're not necessarily in control of what's happening, especially for people. Because one of my other concerns, which is not biased from the perspective of somebody in recovery, I think it's pretty objective, is that sometimes we're not the best judge of like what's black and what's white, or like what's too much, or what is actually helping us, especially if we have a background in addiction or in, it's like, you might think this is a really good thing in that moment, and it's actually not a really good thing. And so having that person who is able to be objective and not necessarily guide you on what journey you're supposed to have, but I just think it has to be through the therapeutic lens one way or another, whether it's a Western therapist who's trained in this kind of therapy, or it's a shaman who has done this, and there's, millennia of history behind it. One way or another, we have to know that we can let go with somebody that we trust on good evidence that this is going to be a therapeutic experience.
It's true. So I just had like 4 different things pop up.
Okay.
I can share. I forgot about this story. So, and again, this points back to the sort of intelligence we're dealing with. So a friend of a friend was in AA. She's sober, had to stop drinking, and she goes to do ayahuasca, and she has a cup, and that part of her kicks in that's like, 1 is cool, but like, what about 4? That like, hey, 1 beer is nice, but I would and I had that with wine. I was like, why would anyone drink 1 glass of wine? What? So this is the crazy thing. So she's having a journey, and then that part kicks in, and she goes right up to the facilitator, and she's like, I need another one. And he's like, right now? And she's like, yeah. He gives her another shot. The medicine shuts off, stops working.
Wow.
And the way that I interpret that is, again, the medicine knew, hey, that part of you that is going to be addicted to getting high or smoking weed or drinking alcohol, that is not going to fly here.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because like I have the opposite where like I am dealing with fear, generations of fear. And every obstacle I realized I'm like, I have to ask for more. So I had the complete opposite of her. And I'd hit these points of suffering and plateaus where I'm like, I guess I have to ask for more. And I'd be shaking and, you know, and like the whole journey depended on that. My whole healing depended on that, of like taking care of myself. So that's like, to me, it's just the vastness of the intelligence of this. And you're also absolutely right, because these spaces can be re-traumatizing. Like, someone I know really well has birth trauma, and she would go into these ceremonies and go right back into being an infant that was not held, that was not touched, that was basically abandoned by her mom. And because it was pre-verbal, she couldn't articulate what was happening. So all the guardians thought she was fine, and it wound up, she ultimately healed it with a woman in the jungle who like actually saw what was happening and helped her. But when she's up here doing the Western, she just cried all night and no one kind of knew what to do with her. And I think with the plant medicines too, is that, again, it's like, it's all about surrender, and it's all about letting go and just trusting the medicine. But on the way to do that, you're literally coming up against all your defense mechanisms and all the different parts of you that do not want to touch the innermost, tenderest spot in your being, because that means death. Or like the last time someone got to that point, it did not go well. So I remember when I started drinking medicine, I'd get so scared. I would just be running around the house, just like, oh, I don't want to be still, you know? And I think like an example of that, like if a guardian's like talking is another one. Like people can just blabber on the medicine as a way to avoid what's really happening in their body. So again, that's where the guardians can be helpful in being like, hey, listen, I think that you're avoiding what you actually need to be working with. Like, why don't you come sit on the mat, and we're going to do everything we can do to make you feel as safe as possible so you can go to those places. And, you know, it's interesting because it's like sometimes you're riding a roller coaster where you don't really have a choice and you're just like, okay, this is what's happening. And then the other times you're more, I don't want to say at war with yourself, but it's like you're in that kind of dance of like, whoa, I'm struggling and resisting. Like, can I let go? Can I breathe? Can I trust? Is it safe to be in my body? And again, that's where having the guardians can be very helpful and having support. And then the last thing that people forget is that, like, no one told me this until like 3 years in, is that when you're dealing with these psychedelics, again, you're dealing with it's not a living, breathing thing, but you're dealing with something that's alive. So you can converse with it. You can negotiate with her. You can say, can you please show this to me in a more gentle way? You know, and it's interesting because when I first started doing that, I realized that I was being a dick to myself and I couldn't speak to myself gently. So I'm like, how am I going to talk to her gently if I can't, you know, treat myself with compassion?
You used the term generations of fear. That jumped out at me. What did you mean by that?
So my perspective and orientation, if we're looking at trauma, it can come from different places. And this is where I'm going to get woo-woo here. And I'm like, bro, you've been woo-woo the last I'm like, yeah, now they're going to start being like, okay, bro.
I cried about a massage. It's okay. We can get woo-woo here.
No, it's get it.
Yeah.
You know, we can have trauma from something that happened to us in this life, in this body. I think that we carry fear and trauma from our parents or our grandparents. And I think I read about it in the book where it's like, you know, we inherit our parents' things like hairlines and height and the skin color. And it's like, we can also inherit their beliefs and their fears. And I think that, you know, if you're sensitive, which most people are, you pick up all these fears, beliefs, conditionings that are really not your own. So that has been a huge journey for me, and just being like, oh, this is actually my parents' anxiety and fear. Oh, this is my grandparents. Oh, this is my great-grandparents. And the wild part about this work is that, like, the healing work, it goes forwards and backwards. You know, forwards, obviously, because you're breaking the cycles and the conditionings and the patterns, so you can live a better life and not inflict unconscious suffering on your kids. But then it also goes backwards, where, like, I've had experiences clearing. I'm laughing because my dad just did ayahuasca for the first time. And like he probably won't mind me telling you about this, but he's going to the Y now and he's like telling everybody in the sauna, like, you ever heard of ayahuasca? I've done ayahuasca. And I'm like, oh my God, bro. But like, you know, he experienced past loved ones and made amends with them. And like, I've had like energetic clearings with like my great grandmother. And like, again, like, you know, it's like you understand why people do things, because, you know, you look at this person in your family and you're like, wow, they were a dick. They literally f***ed my whole family up. And then you realize like, oh, that's why they did it, because they thought they were protecting us. And then so it's like we just unconsciously are given these scripts, and then a lot of people don't even realize they're scripts. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we don't question the beliefs we have or the fears we have. Yeah. And it's crazy because like I know fears is like it can be past life, it can be, you know, generational. And I think there's like I'm gonna butcher it, but it's like I think there's like science around this of like 7 generations back, 7 generations forward, where it's like the DNA is in it.
I don't think there's anything woo-woo about that. I think it's absolutely objective, because intergenerational trauma is a real thing. I mean, if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, we're constantly trying to learn how to adapt to survive. And somewhere along the line, every family has some kind of trauma, whether it's living through a war zone or famine, or, you know, having to flee your country of origin and being on the run, or somewhere along the line, people had to adapt in some way that may have been adaptive at the time, but may have caused some problems in terms of how that manifested later in their lives. And they then pass that down to their children in the way. So in the same way that like something biologically adaptive gets passed down through the genetics, coping mechanisms get passed down. And so if our family's coping mechanism, you know, 200 years ago was alcoholism, that gets passed down. I don't know, you know, whether it's actually in your gene DNA, like there's a gene for alcoholism, we still don't know necessarily, but it's a real thing that runs in families, because it's even if there was no one who sat you down and said, this is the way that we cope with alcohol, it's just there from the time you're born. Even in utero, it's your environment.
And I mean, you're the professional here, so you can attribute to this, but like the way that I've understood, the way that makes the most sense to my brain to look at things and understand things is conditioning. And we can also look at the generational trauma from that perspective. I told myself, I was like, you need to go into the podcast and be funny. And I was just like, this is not, I'm just going here talking about this stuff. But like, you know, I think that's a perfect example where it's like, if you have a great-grandmother, my great-grandmother escaped a war-torn country. Now she has this belief of like, I'm not safe, or insert whatever belief, like you're not safe if you don't have money. So then she has that belief. She raises my grandfather. And again, it's not covert. She's not like, okay, you're not safe if you don't have money. She might even say that, but it's like the underlying essence.
It just permeates every part of your being.
So then there's an imprint. Your grandfather's imprinted with that. And like every time he spends money, he has a panic attack or something. Or he's never feels safe. And then he imprints that to his dad. So, and then, you know, I look at my dad, and this is not I'm just using a hypothetical. So, and then I'm looking at my dad and I'm like, oh, he's having panic attacks, spending money too. And then I look at my thing and I'm like, why do I feel like I'm poor all the time, even if I have this, but you know, this much amount of money in the bank?
Yeah.
So then I think it's like, there's always someone in a family or in the lineage whose job it is to like sort of take the trash out. And I think in this book or the next book, I liken this to like, it's like your grandma skipped the tab on the bill, you know, because she didn't do her own work and then she just passed it down. And then now it's your job to like clear the imprint of it.
Yeah.
And again, it's just like the way that I look at it is just through conditioning and like, okay, so we have 3 generations of this idea and this belief. How do I break that? And I have no scientific evidence behind this, but I think that plant medicine also helps break those imprints, which from the lens of tantra, not like boner sex tantra, like actual like ancient lineage tantra, it's this idea of karmas where it's like we have a certain, which is sort of a samskara, which is basically just conditioning and habits. So like we have a certain amount of time of doing things in a certain way, which also leads to negative outcomes. And then either the practice of meditation or other tantra practices or plant medicine can literally hit you with enough charge to like knock the needle off the groove and like interrupt it. Cause I think like, you know, if we look at depression or anxiety, it's all just pattern interrupting. You know, it's like when someone calls me fat, then I feel bad about myself. If I see another band go to tour, I feel terrible about myself because my entire self-worth is I am a guy in a band. And then I drink ayahuasca and it shows me like, oh, actually like that's not the entire truth of you. That's just a part of you. So it interrupts that pattern. So maybe the next time I see like, oh, this band just went on tour, I will remember like, oh, I'm not going to take the bait of my own suffering. Like that's not exactly who I am. And then maybe I can actually be happy for them. So that's like kind of like, it's like the mathematicalness of healing.
Yeah.
Which is weird. Cause like, I think there's a duality to all this. There's like, the total mysticism of like, whoa, we're like playing in some deep waters, and like who knows what kind of spirits we're messing with, and like who knows where this is going to lead. And then there's also just like the equation of like, okay, there's a reason for depression, there's a reason for anxiety, and there's things we can do about it. There's steps we can take, there's roads we can walk down. Something will hit, we don't know what it's going to be. And I think that's also good for people to hear. And I wish I would have known that, because I know when I was anxious or depressed, I was like, this is never going to end.
Yeah.
But like, that's also my like message. I'm just like, man, there are modalities out there that will not only heal your depression, but then alchemize it into something you never could have known.
You've mentioned a few different modalities in this conversation that sound like things that I deal with all the time in psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about you're working on your codependent issues. You talked about therapies. There were a couple other things in there. I'm curious what your experience is with psychotherapy. If that's something you did before this journey, and if it's something you've done since, and if your experience has been different in those regards.
It's been one of the most important through lines through this entire journey.
Parts work. That was the other thing.
Parts work. Yeah. So, I mean, when my band was blowing up, someone was like, you should go see a therapist. And I saw this man, and I walked in and I was like, all my dreams are coming true, and my rock band's getting famous, and I don't know what to do. And I feel miserable and depressed. And he's like, that was my dream. And I was like, I was like, never going to see this guy again.
Yeah.
So then honestly, like when the depression was bottoming out after my band broke up, it never occurred to me that therapy was an option. So I was like 28, and somebody was like, have you ever seen a therapist? And I was like, what? And I've had the same therapist for almost 10 years and she's been a godsend. So that's the other thing. It's like, I think it's so important to have somebody that you can speak to weekly, because, you know, that's going back to like hey, like people are doing psychedelics and just blowing their minds out. Like it's probably because they don't have a therapist.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And I have two that I go between, and I think it's the most important part if you're dealing with any sort of anxiety, depression, because you need an anchor. Like when I got on antidepressants, it lifted my mood, and then she was the one to help me see my own mind and give me tools. Mm-hmm. So then what happened was when I got off the antidepressants, I had this whole new set of tools that I could use all the time. And I think that, you know, they can help with the psychedelic stuff. And I think there's no kind of one size fits all. Like the other thing about this book is I'm not like, okay, do ayahuasca once and you're cured. Like,
right.
That's not the way to do it.
Right.
Like it's almost like cooking. It's like, you can't be like, I'm only going to put pepper on this. It's like, what? Mm-hmm. What are you doing?
Pepper works for some dishes, but not
yeah,
others.
Yeah. And I think that like, I mean, I have done a lot and I've tried a lot of different things, like, you know, the mystical, like past life regression, Akashic records, entity clearing, wild ass shamanic things like aspecting, to the psychedelic range of like ayahuasca, bufo, combo, like, you know, the whole gambit. And then I've also done an EFT course and training and like parts work, and I've done a bunch of wild ass sexual healing, which is going to be in my new book. And like that was directly related to my anxiety. And then that has all been partnered with steady therapy. Like the premature birth thing that I told you about, I never would have got to the heart of that without two therapists. So it's really, really important.
You've talked multiple times about playing at these ceremonies.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how music facilitates that experience, what you get out of it, and like what that whole thing is about?
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. So again, I just want to preference this by saying that like I do not have training from the jungle people. I have my own experience, and I'm trying not to like belittle that because I do that and then I feel awkward. So I can tell you with the band, it was all an ego trip. I was like, I want people to love me. I want to be important. Look how good I am at guitar. And I was in a ceremony one time and somebody was singing, and I got sent to like the deepest hell plane, just torture. And I'm like, what is happening? And then I started listening deeper, and I was like, I can hear him singing from a place of trauma. I can hear him singing from a place of like, I wish my dad loved me, so I have to be perfect at music. If I'm perfect at music, then my dad will love me. And that's what he was singing out over the room. So from my understanding, there's Ikaros, which I don't do because I wasn't trained in, but those are literally like songs and messages from the plants that are used for healing. So in more traditional settings, I've heard people can sing songs and chants that direct the medicine to different parts of your body. So if somebody can see like, oh wow, like that person is lost in their head, you can send the medicine to your head. And I've heard someone from bird tribes say that basically song and music directs the medicine. So it's a pretty like big responsibility. And when I first started playing music in ceremonies, I really had no idea what I was getting into. And it wasn't until like the end where I sort of had a grip, and basically like the job for me was to keep myself as clear of a channel. So basically it's a meditation, I'm listening. So there's a room of like 20 people on mats, everyone's drinking the medicine, and every night is completely different. And it's my job to use the songs to guide people and help them on their journeys. So I'm in prayer and communion with the medicine, and it's a very thin line of like, am I playing this song for ego, or am I doing this in service? And I think, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think that I was pretty good at being clear, and just like my prayer was always just like, medicine, use my hands, use my throat, use my voice to help people heal. And the crazy part was, there's no job orientation for this. Like no one was like, here's what to watch out for, So it's like, I remember there's one time in Santa Monica where there's like 2 men behind me, and I start playing, and I felt really dark energy come out, and I felt dark energy try to get into my field, and it was like an entity, and like I started blacking out, and I was like, whoa, like this is not Tuesday night in Ohio, where you're just dealing with drunk people. Like it's essentially like people are wide open, their fields are wide open, their auric fields are wide open. I learned how to deal with that, of like channeling light and setting a protection, and then realizing like how fragile it is and how important it is. So by the end of it, I started realizing like, wow, like there's songs that I don't have that I need to play. And then that turned into like improv, which was kind of a big leap for me in the dark, because I'm like trusting that like songs are going to come out and that the words are going to come out. And the crazy thing was, what started happening was started improving. And, just playing for, like, this is the crazy thing. It's like, I'm playing for 4 hours straight. I'm singing in Spanish, Portuguese, mantras, English. Me and my partner wrote original songs. There's cover songs, I throw some Led Zeppelin in there, like Beatles in there, cause we're like new age, like hippie shamanic, So like there's one night I spent improving the whole night essentially. And that's what the last kind of couple ceremonies became. And she came up to me the next day and she's like, why did you do that? And I was like, do what? She's like, I had a question, and every time I asked the question, you sang the answer out. She's like, that happened for 3 hours. And I was like, I don't know. It's not me, like it's literally not me. Like I'm being used by the medicine to help facilitate the healing. And that's the crazy magic of it too. It's like another night, there was a lot of females there, and I'm playing, and I get the download of like, your voice is going to be triggering, and you need to like turn the volume up on that. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, I love women more than anything, So the next morning, this girl comes up to me and she's like, I hate you. She's like, I hate you. Like, what was that music last night? And I was like, okay, ma'am. She's like, you were so powerful that it reminded me of all the times I'd given my power away to men. And you also reminded me that I need to stand in my own power. And I'm like,
you're doing
amazing.
it. You're doing it right now.
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So again, like that's another example of like, that's me not consciously being like, I'm going to trigger her into healing. And that's kind of the most fascinating part of it. And it's like a very subtle thing where it's like some nights the energy is so crazy. People are throwing up, people are screaming, people are fighting, and you're just managing the chaos, doming the chaos. And other nights it's like you're at sea and you can only see like 2 inches ahead of you. Yeah. And it's like the most fragile web and you don't want to disturb it. But it's the wild. I'm probably going to write a book about it or something, because it's just like, and then also like I'm drinking the medicine, so I'm having my own experience. Yeah. I was like, bro, this is so niche. I was like, I don't know a lot of people that can do this.
But that's the power of music, is that it transcends.
Yeah.
It goes right to emotion.
Well, and that's the thing, because it's like, a Beatles song, and then I'll play Let It Be or Here Comes the Sun, and someone comes up to me after and they're like, my grandpa played that before he died, or like when you played this song, I was able to talk to my partner who died or someone who died, so it was really, I have a hard time accepting compliments. Like people give me compliments and I usually black out because I'm like, but it's like, I started having to write them down, because it's just like, it felt like I was using my gifts in the highest way to help people heal.
Yeah.
It was really cool. So
this is really fascinating. And I feel like I could ask you like 20 more questions, but we'd have you here all day.
That's fine. I mean,
do you want to play us something before we end?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Why don't we do a sign off
Yeah,
real
yeah.
quick, and so we can, and then we'll bring your guitar out. So
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
been
Thank you
awesome.
for being open and willing to talk about this stuff too. Because even, it's like I am still wrestling with that of like, bro, you just wanted to play guitar and now you're out here talking about like wild ass shit, but
It's a long and winding road,
who knows?
right?
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
Well, it's been interesting for me, and I think, like I said at the top, I think we have a lot of commonalities in our background and some similarities, and probably some things, different ways that we see things, and that's always a wonderful thing, is to engage in a conversation where you see that overlap and where you have those commonalities and ways in which you can learn from each other. So this has been really interesting and eye opening for me. So
Amazing.
thank you very much.
Thank you. And like I've read about this in my book, and I'm writing about the next one. It's like I do not have any dogma. Like I'm not out here being like, this is what you have to do, but this is what you have to believe. Like again, I'm just like, this is my story. This is what I found to be true. If it resonates or if something excites you, go try it in a safe way. Like there's ways to do things where you minimize, risk or danger and do it in a good way.
And the book, let's give it a quick shot. The book is called Thank God for Depression. Where people find it anywhere they buy books, right?
Yeah, Amazon, my website.
It's very pretty.
Yeah, it's
I
cool,
like
right?
it. It's very soothing.
Yeah, thank you.
Kyle Nicolaides has been our guest this week on the Harder to Breathe podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks to Kyle again. Tune in every week. Every Tuesday we drop new episodes. We'll see you next time right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast.
Don't know how I woke up here. My father's car, an open road, a Sedona sky, smiles, and I should feel invincible. I've come to see what I have lost. I'll find myself again after years of being inked to someone else's pen. Tilt my head back, I get high. It's only time in my life I feel alive. I'm running on dreams and I've got all I need. None of it seems real anymore. Photos prove that I was there, but who I see is someone that I'm never sure I've met. The red rocks don't care who I am, as I get lost inside the mystery and wonder what they mean to me at this time in my life. I'm waking up to a light that has always been there, but I've been afraid to let shine. I'm running on dreams and I've got all I need. These dreams, these dreams, these dreams. They lift me to heaven and shoot my balloon to the sky. There's a fear I'll never figure it out. The truth is that we don't arrive but fall forever till we just enjoy the ride. So maybe I trust that where I'm heading always guides me home. Sometimes the path is getting lost, only to remember who we've been all along. I'm running on dreams and I've got all I need. These dreams, these dreams lift me to heaven. They lift me to heaven and shoot my balloon to the sky. Yeah, 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 yeah. Ooh. Yeah, da, 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 da. Yeah, da, 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 da.
Beautiful, man.
Thank you guys.